So today I was asked an interesting question. I was asked by a friend of mine, what really got me into farming? It made me sit down because he said, Mitch, you've been in this business for almost a decade, 10 years or so. You've been in this business. What really sparked the interest? What got the love? What got you to want to be in this and actually get to excel in it? I said, I really don't know. I think it really has to start off with a story. First and foremostly, I always say I come from a family of generational farmers. My father's father, my grandfather from my father's side, was a farmer and also worked on a white man or worked on a white man's farm in the Grootfontein area. He was a very good employee. He excelled at it. That his boss at the time would gifted him with some cattle and also gifted him with a bucky. So that really meant a lot when you gift your farm worker with a bucky. I think the same with my mother's father. He was also a farmer. He was a livestock farmer and also did partook in horticulture himself and my grandmother. The two of them were the farming people. So I think I got it from them. But what really, and no, nonetheless, I got respect for those communal land farmers in the Zambezi region. They are really the hardest working people I've ever seen. You know, getting up at 4 o'clock to plow fields with oxen is not an easy thing. You could use a tractor, but now they're modernizing with tractors. Some of them are still keeping the traditional methods alive. This is why I got so much respect for them. But what really got me so much interested in farming was the one conversation I had, the one visit I did with a friend of mine where I traveled to his farm. This was back, I think, in the 2006, somewhere there, when I traveled to his farm and I went for a farm visit. I went with him. He invited me, white friend, and I went to his farm. I got just to see how um, you see the small scale subsistent farming, how it looks, and then you see a big scale commercial farm, how it's run and how it's managed, how himself, his dad, their farm workers really pushed that farm to be the level it is. The funny story was that my friend's dad was actually a certified engineer, had a PhD, had a degree, but the man left all that to go back to the farm after his father died, passed on, and initially left him the farm. I think if I remember properly, this was quite a while back. If I remember properly, they had close to about 100, about 150 Bosmaras. I remember the drive down to their crawl. Their crawl was like 5K away from the farmhouse. We drove in their old Nissan Bucky. We drove to that crawl, and within the distance, because the when you come, it was a hill, and then when you come down a hill, you see the crawl. Within the distance, when you drove over that hill, and I looked into the horizon, I just saw one color. I just saw red. It was so much red. It was so much cattle. I didn't. I have seen people with a lot of cattle, but coming from a communal area, I've seen people having various cattle. But on this farm, I just saw one color, and it was red, and they were all Bosmaras. They had divided their kraal into sections. The cattle that are with calf are kept one side, their bulls are kept one side, their heifers that have been taken away from their moms are kept one side. The ones that have been with the bull are kept one side. They ran it at such a level that it worked like clockwork. And the best thing I heard from this guy was he told me that, Mitch, in this crawl we have maybe close to 100 animals, but out of that 100, each farm worker, each of our 6 or 10 farm workers, each farm worker has 10 of his own cows here, and we let them keep their cattle here duty free. They don't pay any tax, they don't pay any rent from us. All they do is that they work with us. Even when they're normal working with us, we still keep the animals here because these people are not just our farm workers. These people are our family. They have really contributed to the success and the success and the success and the overall growth of this farm. We owe a lot to them. Because when my dad moved here, when he left his job in Windhoek to move to the farm, his father had tried. His father had pushed the farm as far as he could, but we had problems with leopards, we have problems with hyenas, we have cheetahs, we have jackals, all these things. And we have been able to, in a week back in the day our farm, before when my dad was still alone here, you would lose close to maybe 6 or 7 cows or cow and calf. Once in a while, will a leopard maybe luckily kill a bull? But when we got these farm workers, we don't lose as much, maybe 1 or 2 in a year or two. We don't lose as much because they came in here and they really assisted us. They are as much part of this farm as I am part of this farm. If I am to inherit this farm from my father, I'd love to keep these guys here. Half of their kids, my dad pays for them to be in school. He pays for their education. He does that. And he has built homes for them. So there were part of the reasons that I was like, wow, so his father is making a major impactful change in people's lives here. He's not just focusing on himself to make money. He is literally assisting his farm workers. And the amount of cattle they had, and the fact that I saw his father was happy. His father didn't really look like a person who was under pressure. He lived a happy life, and his son enjoyed it. He told me here, he can wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, go out into the field, take his rifle, go out into the field, find a kudu, find an oryx, and shoot that, and that's what they'll have for dinner. Or he can get on his tractor and he can drive around the farm, stuff like that. It was quite entertaining. The week I spent there really made me fall in love because I was introduced to the communal cattle. I knew that some of our communal cattle were a bit temperish. You couldn't really approach some of them, but his animals were just amazing. When he walked into the crawl of the bulls would walk to him literally. So they get a good scratch and a good scratch. He talks to his animals as if he's talking to kids. He'd sometimes kiss them on the nose, and I found that weird, but he did that. And after we went to the cattle, went to his goat crawl, and he was running Burba goats, and I think we're around about 15, 16 somewhere there. Went to his crawl, and he was running some Burgoot goats, and it was just a full crawl. It was the same setup they had for their cattle. Was the same setup they had at his goats. So he looked at me and he told me, Mitch, I've been able to build this at this level, not because I looked at the financial aspect of a farm, because I looked at it from a point of being passionate about it. Farming has money and farming doesn't have money. That's the sad reality that's there. But what keeps me coming back to this farm every time to come see my dad, to come work, to come see to come see the guys working on the farm with my dad, who have assisted and contributed in him building this farm, is because I'm passionate about it. I remember he told me a story of how when his father bought him his first goats, because he didn't know a lot about goats, they all died. I think they contracted worms, internal worms, and they all died. He lost all his goats. I think his father bought him like 20 goats. They all died. He could have packed up and given up, but he never did. He came back. He came back and he said he tried again, and he improved and he learned. So every day for him was a learning experience. And the fact that he enjoyed the farm, he enjoyed the wide open spaces, the tranquility, being around his animals, having people who work with him, working towards a dream and an ideal, who do not work against him, is part of the reason why he went back to that farm. And I won't lie, the first time I saw all those Bosmaras, I saw all those burgoods, I saw all their chickens, and I just saw their setup on their farm. I think that's what sold me, and I was like, look, I want to get into this, not over the money aspect, but I want to get into it. I want to try. I also want to one day have close to 100 Bosmara cattle. And then I got my first agricultural magazine. I read some articles on how some commercial farmers in South Africa, I think some of them also in Namibia, how they had taken upon farming and had become so successful that they are brands today. Some of their names, we don't even know the person. We just know we associate his name to a brand the same way we associate Jordan to Jordans to the Nike shoe, rather than associating to the basketball player. These are some of these guys were known. I got to read about guys like Up Bosmara. I got to read about guys like what is this guy's the top Brahman breeder in South Africa. There are quite a number, but the name is eluding me now. I got to read about some of them. I got to read about some top Simbra breeders in South Africa. I got to read about some top Nguni breeders and how these guys have been doing this for the past 25, 26, even 30 years or 40, some close to even 70 years, and how they have built their herds to become top, to become one of the best cattle breeds in the continent, and so for winning awards. And I said, part of that also pushed me. And I said, look, I also want to do that. If these people can do this, I also want to do that. I want to get involved. I also want to have my chance. I want to have my shot to also prove to other people that we can, not just that we can, but that I can also achieve that. That has been one of the driving factors for me always as a young person. What made me get into agriculture was never really the money aspect, but was getting in there and one day seeing my name being associated with top quality livestock. When they mention Mutumba, or when they mention Mitchell, or when they mention Simata, that name is associated with the top quality Simbra or Brahman or Semental or Bosmara bulls he breeds, and how his method of farming has really come into the agricultural industry and has changed the landscape of how agriculture is done in this country. They were part of the reasons, man. Reading these books, reading of how some of these guys went, guys like Jan Bosma, who developed the Bosmara, reading guys like Kettle King in the States, who is really prided with developing the Santa Gertrudis kettle. All these guys were part of the reasons that I wanted, that I've always said, that I want to get in here, I want to get into farming, I want to do something that hasn't been done. I want to farm, but I don't want to do it like the next guy. I want to go up, some of the guys that I look up to, like the Groenevalds, the Cavaris, the Chiheros, all these guys, I want to go up against them. And I also want to prove that I'm as good as them or I'm better. That's what got me into this business. It was never really about the money. Money did maybe linger a bit in my head, at the back of my head, where you're like, yeah, if you sell 100, at least you can make 100,000. That lingered really there, but it was never really the main drive and the main mission. The main mission that I remember, I told a friend of mine on Facebook, Mr. Alex, I told him, I'd love to be cattle king one day of Namibia. And that has always been the dream. That has always been my focus, and that's always what I've always wanted to work towards. So to my subscribers, my viewers, I'd love to hear your opinions. I'd love some of you guys to tell me why you guys got into farming, what really got you there, who got you into it. For me, as I said, I came from a farming family who still farm today in a communal area, subsistent. I met a white friend who took me to his farm and I got interested. I read agricultural books that got me more interested. And then I fortunately was able to convince my parents in 2010 to start for us to commercial farm here in the Witwatersrand area. It has been I have to say it's been an up and down journey. It's not been easy. There have been the good, there have been the bad, there have been the times where you want to just throw your hands up in the air and say, I'm done. But you always keep coming back, you always keep coming back. I think the best advice I was told was farming is like a marriage, no matter how many times you and your wife fight and argue with each other, you always come back to each other. So yeah, that's part of the reasons why I got into farming. I'm looking forward to read from your opinions why you guys got into farming. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful Wednesday evening.